Welcome back to App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Factor. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We've got a big show today, all about macOS 14 and our wishes. You know, today, though, in the pre-show, we talked about a bunch of different things. We talked about app transitions, things we might be trying and changing to. We even had a robot enter the room at the very end of the segment.
We had a robot invading your office at the very end, and that was slightly concerning for a few seconds.
The lights went out, and the robot entered. I got to turn the lights back on in here. And a little follow up on some of the Mac issues I've been having. I mean, I have a lot of wishes for Mac, mostly that my Mac works again. But if you want to listen to that pre-show, you got to join App Stories Plus. You can subscribe to the show and get extended ad-free versions a day early if you subscribe, and you can get it also if you're a Club Premier member. That's our highest tier of Club Mac Stories. To subscribe to App Stories, just go to appstories.plus. And if you're interested in the club and learning more about what we offer there, along with the Club Premier plan that has App Stories Plus baked right into it, go to plus.club. All right, Federico, let's dig into these wishes today.
All right. So before we do though, I have some follow-up for things that
you do. Oh, yes, you do.
I have some follow-up for a few things that I forgot to mention. So when we were talking about iPadOS 17, it's so difficult to keep track of these different numbers. There's a couple of things that I forgot to mention that I'm mentioning today. Live activities. If Apple, we focused on lock screen widgets in our episode, but I also think Apple has an opportunity to bring live activities, so the real-time widgets that we've seen on iOS 16, to bring them over to iPadOS. And I'm going to mention this in the context of macOS later as well. And on iPadOS, I don't know, every time I use my iPad, I take a look at the status bar, and it's so empty, especially on a big iPad Pro in landscape. You got your time, your clock on the left side, and a few icons like Wi-Fi and location on the right side, and everything in the middle is empty. And I just feel like maybe there's an opportunity there for Apple to do something that is like a new take on the menu bar, and maybe live activities could be part of that. Like imagine like a little real-time timery thing, for example, which is effectively what Timery does on the Mac, but it's a custom menu bar app. Maybe there's a way for Apple to reinvent menu bar apps and use the same live activities framework and sort of, kill two birds with one stone. Is that? I always forget.
Yeah,
you guys killed the bird.
Right expression.
You guys killed the bird, right? You don't catch the bird.
I know.
In Europe, we catch the bird.
Don't catch
we
it,
said this
We're
before. We said it before. You killed the bird. But yes,
much more violent.
Very, very, very much so. So I think there's an opportunity to rethink the menu bar and reuse an existing framework. And we know that Apple loves to reuse existing stuff whenever they can. I also wanted to mention the ability to pin Safari extensions to the Safari toolbar. That's something you can do on macOS. iPadOS now has a customizable toolbar, but the Safari one is not customizable. And I think it should be. You should be able to say the 1Password extension, I want to pin it right there next to my address bar. And I want it to be one click away. And I also would love to see, and this probably sounds silly, but hey, now the iPad has Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro. And I think it's time to have better backup options for Pro users. I want to see Time Machine for iPad. At this point, I think it's realistic to imagine that there's a lot of people who are using an iPad Pro as their primary computer, desktop workstation. They're hooking it up to a studio display. They're using Logic. They're using Final Cut. They use it as a laptop. They use it as a tablet. And I think there should be more options than just iCloud backup. I think there should also be a local option based on Time Machine. And lastly, this is more of a sort of quality of life enhancement. We talked about, make Spotlight better, especially for running shortcuts. And one specific issue that I have that I would love to see fixed in iPadOS 17, when I run a shortcut from Spotlight on my iPad, so I do Command Space, type the name of the shortcut, press Enter, and the shortcut starts running, I should be able to select menu options
Oh, yes.
for the
yes.
shortcut with my arrow keys. Instead, right now, the keyboard focus remains in Spotlight. So you see the shortcut in front of Spotlight, but your keyboard is still controlling Spotlight in the background. And it doesn't make sense. It honestly feels like a bug. And I hope this gets fixed.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. That's a great one. You know, while we're talking about follow-up, I guess I should mention that I did have a bit of a complaint about tvOS last week about the up next queue and managing it. And I guess you can long press on those old items and make them go away from that home screen without having to dig into the individual shows. So that's good to know that it's there. You know, I think the thing with tvOS for me is that if it's not obvious, I just don't do it because I'm really just there to hit a couple of buttons and start a show. I don't think about the operating system in the same way that I think about other Apple operating systems. I feel like I need kind of the obvious version, and I'm not used to digging around looking for settings and hidden features in tvOS in quite the same way I do on the Mac or the iPad or somewhere else. Anyway, let's get on with macOS.
macOS 14, and I will say on the show, I am calling it. I posted about this on Mastodon in reply to I don't remember who, but I did it a few days ago. I'm calling it for macOS Skyline as the name. Skyline is one of the trademarks that they have for macOS names in the trademark office.
Is that a place?
I don't know.
In California?
Is it, or maybe it's the San Francisco Skyline?
No idea.
I don't know. But macOS Skyline taking the Mac to new heights. That's my pitch for marketing.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I mean, it's good enough for me. Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
I don't know. I think you're wrong.
Okay. Well,
but it's good enough. Good enough for me.
All right.
All right. Why don't we focus on some more, I don't know, practical things, Federico?
Yes.
You were just talking about arrow keys, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that bugs me in Safari on the Mac, where if I go to Safari and I put my cursor up in the address bar and I see my favorites pop down below, I can't get to them without using a pointer. I can't get to them with the arrow keys. It's a really small thing, but it's something I've always wanted to be able to do, is like have a
you're right.
command.
I just tried this and it's not
working.
working.
You use Command L to get your cursor into the address bar, but you can't then access those favorites without actually clicking on them, which I think is, I don't know, I just think it's a bad feature. I think it ought to be.
While we're talking about Safari, I did have one thing I wanted to mention, which is something that I also covered before. I'll just say it again because maybe I will just will it into existence. Some love for Safari reading list. You know, it's such a shame that we are living through this era of a renaissance for read later apps and services. And we don't see anything from Apple on this front. They're using arguably the most popular mobile browser, or one of the. I mean, it's either going to be Chrome on Android or Safari on iPhone, and they have a real opportunity here to create a really nice system for saving articles from Safari and to integrate with Shared With You and other places on iOS. And they have been doing nothing effectively for the past several years. So some love for reading list. And if they do anything for reading list, I hope they also do it on the Mac. I hope it's not something that they just do on the iPhone. All right, before we talk about other apps, I think we should address the elephant in the room, and that's, multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
So Apple introduced Stage Manager on macOS and iPadOS last year. The rumor was, I heard from a couple of people last year that Stage Manager started as a Mac feature and, it was ported to iPadOS. And, that was probably the reason why it was so polished and problematic on iPadOS at the beginning, because it was not meant to be. It didn't start. My understanding is that the project didn't start as an iPad first sort of effort inside of Apple. But still, I think it's pretty safe to say that Stage Manager is better on macOS than iPadOS. I think it makes more sense there. I think it's more fully fleshed out. And obviously, you have a much better system in place for resizing windows, moving windows. Like Stage Manager on macOS, I think is better because it's a mode that you can choose to have or go back to something else. Whereas on iPadOS is the only way you have to do multi-windowing. Still, for Stage Manager, I would love to see a couple of things in Stage Manager myself. One of them is let me rename a Stage Manager app group. So, for example, let's say that I have a group that is Obsidian, Safari, and I don't know, Audio Hijack. Let me rename that group podcasts, because maybe that's the apps that I use for my podcast workflow. Like, let me see groups, like actual labels for these groups that I have in Stage Manager, and let me pin them. Like, let me create a pin group that is never accidentally, quote unquote, destroyed by taking a window elsewhere. Just let me save this as a favorite combination of apps that is always there. And on a similar note, I would love to be able to create presets for Stage Manager. So the same idea, let me create a preset that is, Ivory and things together for when I want to save all the cool Mastodon posts in my task manager. And let me create a preset, and maybe that preset could be activated with a shortcut or something that, even if those apps are no longer open, recreates that preset of apps from scratch every time, like a little recipe for a workspace in Stage Manager. These are two things I would love to see myself.
Yeah, those are great great suggestions. I think overall for me, what I'd like to see is real shortcut support, keyboard shortcut support, another big one, both of which allow me to work faster in Stage Manager if I have them. And I want to get rid of the window dance. And I've explained the window dance before, both here and to Apple. But if you have any app that has an open dialog in it, say you're opening a numbers spreadsheet.
That one is so bad.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The open dialog comes and takes over the stage. Then when you select a document and open it, the open dialog closes, as it should. But because it's closed, whatever the last app you were using shows up on the stage. But then when the numbers document finishes opening, then it takes over the stage. So it kind of does this back and forth, which is super irritating. And there's a lot of apps that do it. It's just how it works. And it needs to be, they need to find a way around that, because it just drives me bananas. I'd also like, this is, we can talk about widgets in, I guess, two things. One is I want to be able to get the app that's not on the top of the stack. So if I have in the strip, if I have two or three apps grouped together, and I can see that I've got Safari, but it's underneath, say, messages, I can't get at it. I have to do something with messages first.
This is a problem. This is a problem on iPadOS as well. And I've been thinking about this, and I think the way they should be able to fix this is some new take.
Spread them out.
Yeah, some new take on expose, for example, or like a mission control like UI that is limited to the group you're hovering over. Just like, let me sort of explode this workspace and just let me pick a window from. Yeah, I get what you mean.
The other thing that I really want for Stage Manager on kind of a system level with system apps is the ability, and really third-party apps, but as a system-wide way to pin apps that will float and stay on any stage. So like, for instance, right now, right now as we record, I'm using the Audio Hijack menu bar app pinned in the corner so I can see that the recording is continuing to go, right? And I can quickly press stop if I need to. And if I switch to another stage, that Audio Hijack widget is going to stay there showing me what's going on with my recording. I'd love to have that for, say, like a mini view of the calendar, or maybe I want my messages there because I'm waiting to hear from somebody. There's a lot of things you could do with widgets that aren't hidden under the clock or on the desktop, but are floating somewhere in a corner. And I've been using a lot more apps like this in the right-hand corner of my Mac, whether it's Audio Hijack or Sleeves, so I can see what music is playing. there's a lot of, utilities, and I think little views into apps that might be really nice to be able to pin on top of all of your stages.
Do you use Stage Manager in your sort of
I
typical?
do. I
You
use it. I
do.
use it.
Hmm.
I use it full time now,
Full
and
time. Hmm.
full time. And I use it, I think, mainly because
I'm gonna try and enable it now.
it cleans up clutter, really. I
Hmm.
mean, to me, it's an anti-clutter feature because it requires, as I said, it requires too much mechanical arranging to get the stage you want the way you want it. But when you do have a stage and you're going to be working on that one for a while, it's really nice to have the other things accessible and nearby, but out of the way. So you're not seeing overlapping windows or a lot of stuff on your desktop or anything like that.
Yeah, I just enabled it now, and everything is well. Okay, so I can immediately tell it's better than iPadOS. It's been a while since I
It
last tried it.
is. Yeah. Because like if I'm writing, if I have a stage that has 2 or 3 things in it, including Obsidian, and I'm writing something and all I want to see is Obsidian for a while, I just maximize the window so it covers up the strip as well. I mean, I've still got the option to do that sort of thing, but it also kind of clean because the windows are resizable at any size I want. It makes it really easy to do kind of a side by side thing or whatever I want to do.
Yeah, I still think it's weird though that there's no setting, there's no like toggle to say by default add, or is there? Because I have no idea. Is there a default setting to say, for example, right now I am in a workspace and I have Notion and Safari. If I click on
Yep.
the Finder icon, it creates a new workspace. Whereas I would
Yes.
love the default be able to be by default add it here in my
Yep.
existing workspace.
That's what I mean by too much manual setup. Anytime you want to add something to the mix, you have to go find the app and open it like you normally would on a Mac, but then then switch back to the stage you're on before, and then drag the Finder window in or whatever app it happens to be.
I guess what you can do is, well, it goes back to what you mentioned about the little dance that you got to do, because if I
Yeah.
click on Finder, and so I'm taking in a new workspace that it's just has Finder in it, then it means I have to go back to my Safari plus Notion workspace, and then in the
Yes.
strip, but not in the dock, in the strip,
Right.
I can shift click to say bring Finder into this workspace. Whereas I think Apple should fix this in a couple of different ways. One, make a system-wide toggle that is basically a setting that says, hey, by default, do you want to create new workspaces, or do you want to add a window to the existing one? Or perhaps more simply, shift clicking should become accepted everywhere as a shortcut to say add to the current workspace. You should be able to shift click an icon in the dock, in Spotlight, and not just in the strip as it is the situation right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the default really should be added to the current stage because the thing with the Mac is you don't have the same kind of limitations about the number of apps that can go on a stage.
Mm-hmm.
So I would rather have it added to the current stage and then drag it off into the strip if I need to.
So about multitasking, I also would like to mention a couple of non-stage manager things. The first one is, you know me, I
Okay.
love tile-based multitasking in the style of Windows 11. Apple is probably never going to do it because Apple is not a fan of tiling windows. But this is the wish list episode, so might as well mention it.
Yep.
And I would love for Apple to Sherlock Mission Control Plus, which is a utility we mentioned before on App Stories. Mission Control Plus lets you hide and close or quit apps from the Mission Control view. So from Mission Control, you can hover over a window and you have a few options in terms of, do you want to close the window or do you want to also quit the associated app? And I think this is something that should become part of Mission Control. Lastly, semi-related to multitasking, before we move on to system apps, obviously, we are going to do a standalone episode for the operating system that doesn't exist. XROS seems to be the name, according to trademark filings.
Yep.
Is it? I mean, it's not 10ROS, right? It's
XR. No, I think it's XR. Yes.
XROS. But if the rumors are true, I really hope that we get macOS support for the Apple headset. Let me use my computer in VR just like I can use my PC with my Meta Quest headset. Ideally, I would also love for this feature to be supported on iPadOS. I don't think it will. I don't think they'll do it like Mac only. So let me use my Mac with a headset on. Let me have multiple displays. Like, let me have some fun with a computer in a virtual environment. I hope this will. I mean, obviously, this. I don't think it'll be exclusive to desktop computers. I think with the MacBook Air, I should be able to take advantage of this. And we'll talk more. We'll talk more about this in the context of the XROS wishes episode.
Right. One other system thing I would like to mention before we get to the apps is Spotlight, which I think should become more a launcher-like, more like Raycast or Alfred or Launchbar, in the sense that I think it's time to open up Spotlight to do more actions. Really what we've seen with the recent updates to macOS over the last few years is an expansion of its access to formatted content, like looking up information about sports teams or a movie or a TV show, something like that. And a lot of music stuff too. What I'd like to see though is the ability to just execute common actions, maybe, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a system app or a third-party app. I think that there's a lot more that can be done there than is being done currently.
All right. Give me a wish for an app.
All right, I guess I'll start with Calendar. I actually am using the Calendar app full time right now, and here's my dilemma. I don't have very deep calendar needs, so I'm not really a target user.
You're not
for
a
an app
calendar
like
power user, is what you're saying.
No, so I'm not really the target audience for an app like Fantastical, really. But I do really appreciate Fantastical's natural language and kind of shortcut syntax that it uses for creating events. And the problem with Apple's Calendar app is it really does require, especially on the Mac, a lot of clicking around to change all the fields, add attendees and times and reminders and whatever it happens to be. And I'd like to see that interaction rethought for just streamlining the process of adding those events to your calendar.
I'm not a calendar power user either, but I agree with both of these wishes. Those would be nice to have. Okay, so let me pick an app from my basket over here. Notes. We talked about notes. We talked about notes in the pre-show a little. These are largely similar to wishes that I had about when we covered iOS and iPadOS. I would love to have Markdown support. I'm not saying that Notes should become a Markdown editor, but if I paste in some Markdown, maybe Notes could automatically convert that Markdown into the rich text equivalent. Let me create links to other notes in the Notes app. Sort of to rival what you can do in Craft, in Notion, in Obsidian. This feature has become really a staple of the modern note-taking app experience, not just on desktop, but really everywhere. And Notes is really lagging behind when it comes to how you can reference other notes inside of your library. And this one, a favorite of mine that I also want to reiterate here, if I paste a URL, I should be able to convert that raw HTTPS URL into a native visual rich link. This feature is available in Mail, where if the app detects that you just pasted a link, it gives you an option to turn that link into a little rich link snippet. I would love this feature to be supported in Notes. And I also mentioned before the ability to create sub pages. I think it's time for Apple Notes to become a little more like Craft and other similar apps. Let me create sections inside of a note that take me into a sub-page or subsection view, to sort of have more structured documents in Notes if I want to. Totally optional, but if I want to.
Yeah, I think I would go the opposite way with structured notes in that I would like to have an option to just do plain text notes. You know how Obsidian allows you to do, they call it source view, but what it really is just plain text mode.
Yeah.
where you see the raw markdown, and then you can go into a preview mode, which is to me is more like a reading mode that actually turns the URL, the markdown links into hyperlinks and displays images and things like that. I'd like to have that kind of toggle in Notes as well. I kind of feel like rich text gets in my way. Maybe I'm just so far deep into Markdown that that's just where you end up after writing that way for so many years. But I really feel like sometimes rich text gets in the way of me actually creating notes in all of these apps, not just Apple Notes, but also things like Craft and Notion, which is why I think I'm really, as I talked about a little bit in the pre-show, I'm really doubling down on just plain text and using Obsidian for all of the information that I'm saving. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Factor. Spring is here and summer's around the corner, and who doesn't want wholesome and convenient meals to energize you for warmer, more active days and keep you on track to reaching your goals? Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, and it can help you fuel up fast with ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and tackle everything on your to-do list. If you're too busy to cook this May, you can skip the trip to the grocery store and skip the chopping, prepping, and cleanup too. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat them and enjoy. Then get back outside to soak up that warmer weather. Factor delivers delicious, flavor-packed options on the menu every week to fit a variety of lifestyles, including keto, calorie smart, which are around or less than 550 calories per serving, vegan and veggie, which have the option to add a protein on selected meals, and protein plus, which have 30 grams of protein or more per serving. And because they're prepared by chefs and approved by dietitians, each meal has everything you need. With more than 34 weekly options, there's always something new to try. Plus, you can choose from more than 45 add-ons, including breakfast items like apple cinnamon pancakes, bacon and cheddar egg bites, and potato, bacon, and egg breakfast skillets, plus cold-pressed juices, shakes, and smoothies. And if you're looking to pack in more protein, you can add on filling options like a salmon fillet or chicken wings to your Factor meals. Factor meals are ready faster than restaurant delivery in just 2 minutes. Plus, it's more budget-friendly than takeout. And you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice because Factor offsets 100% of their delivery emissions to your door, sources 100% renewable electricity for their production sites and offices, and they feature sustainably sourced seafood in their meals. I've been enjoying Factor a lot. They sent me a bunch of meals as well as some smoothies, and there's always those nights during the week when you're pressed for time. And I don't know about you, but I always end up doing something like grabbing some takeout somewhere, and it's never healthy. The thing with Factor is that these meals are healthy. So you've got them sitting in your fridge, you just pop them in the microwave for a couple of minutes, and you're good to go. They're healthy and delicious. Plus, the smoothies really fill the gap if you've got a long day. I got up really early the other morning, and by about 10:30, 11 o'clock, I was incredibly hungry. I would probably normally grab a bag of pretzels or something from the pantry, but instead I had one of these smoothies. It was a lot healthier, and it did the job keeping me filled until my next meal. This May, get Factor and enjoy clean eating without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered straight to your door, ready in 2 minutes with no prep and no mess. Head on over to factormeals.com/appstories50. That's the number 50, and use the code AppStories50 to get 50% off your first box. That code again is AppStories50 at factormeals.com/AppStories50 to get 50% off your first box. I'll put a link in the show notes too. Our thanks to Factor for their support of the show.
My pitch for reminders this year is a simple one. I have one feature that I would love to see in reminders for macOS. A quick entry window.
That would be nice.
A system-wide quick entry window for reminders, similar to the ones you may have seen from literally every other macOS task manager. Things to do is OmniFocus. Hey, can you name another task manager for Mac, John?
Microsoft To Do.
Okay, see, that's another. I'm not sure Microsoft To Do as a quick entry window, but still my point stands.
Think so.
A quick entry window to let you capture a new reminder from anywhere on your Mac without having to open the Reminders app and clicking the plus button to add a new task. Let me assign it a keyboard shortcut, and everywhere I am, it doesn't matter, just let me invoke a quick entry window, pops up, I save my reminder, add a date with natural language, and that's it.
Very nice. Oh, you know what? I'm going to give you another system wish, Federico.
Okay.
I want system-wide syncing of settings for apps, not just system ones, but third-party developer ones. I'm thinking about an API that would allow developers to do what they're doing with Safari extensions. And so you'd be able to go into your settings for an app, and it would have a similar message, which would be like, you've got this app on another Mac, or you have this on your iPad. Would you like this?
Well, now I want it. Now I want this feature. Why did you have to mention it?
Yeah, because here's the thing. I mean, you don't always want to do that, right?
No.
You may have setups that are different from one device to another. So you don't want to make it a default thing. But there are times where, especially when I'm talking about like my desktop Mac and my portable Mac, I want certain apps to be set up in exactly the same way. And I don't want to have to deal with setting them up 2 times. I mean, this is coming from the person who just had to set up the same desktop Mac twice in a month. I've been thinking about this sort of stuff, and I want to make it easier for people to set up their Macs once and then copy some of those settings over to other devices.
Very nice, very nice. I really want this. So now it's your fault if they don't do it.
Yes.
I'm going to. So I want to close with shortcuts, but before I get to shortcuts, music. I have a couple of things.
Talk about music.
Couple of things for music on my end. Better performance. I mean, the music app for Mac is so slow to use. Like it just feels so janky.
In a lot of ways.
In a lot of different ways. In a lot of big ways and small ways. It just feels so unfinished and rough. I have no better way to describe it. It just feels not done and slow. And let me detach the lyrics sidebar and let me float it anywhere.
Oh, that would be nice.
Maybe that could be part of your idea because I forgot to say, I also agree with your idea of floating widgets and just new options for bringing widgets into macOS and not just in a secluded area off into a sidebar. I really feel like, especially if Apple is doing interactive widgets this year, it's about time to bring widgets back to the desktop and bring back dashboard. I guess is sort of what I'm saying. The idea of let me make my desktop more fun. Let me have icons. Let me have widgets. Let me click on those widgets and do stuff. I think it's time to go beyond the idea of you have your sidebar for widgets and that's about it. So maybe a floating Apple Music lyrics widget could be one of those.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I think part of the problem that music has is it feels like a skin over top the iTunes code.
It does feel like that. It does feel like that.
Yeah, I think there's legacy code issues that are happening here, and that's the only thing that I can think of that really explains some of the discrepancies between the way it works versus iOS and iPadOS, and also some of the bugs. I mean, AirPlay is pretty buggy. I've had a lot of problems with AirPlay. I've had a lot of problems with views opening up and refreshing in the Apple Music service. And in terms of wishes, though, I got I guess a pretty simple one, which is let me take my music with me. When I'm listening to something at my desk on my Mac, I want to take it with me when I go out for a walk on my iPhone, but I can't do that right now.
Okay, so I am going to close out this episode with shortcuts wishes,
All right.
Shortcuts for macOS. And the big one for me is, of course, real native personal automations in shortcuts. Personal automations reimagined for macOS with brand new kinds of triggers that really take advantage of macOS. I mentioned before the idea of third-party triggers for personal automations in shortcuts. I would love to see those on macOS too, but I was thinking about the things that make macOS unique. And one of them is you're probably hooking up a bunch of accessories and hardware to a Mac, more so than you do with an iPhone for sure. And so imagine personal automations for shortcuts on the Mac with support for accessory is attached as a trigger or accessory is unplugged. whether it's a USB drive or a microphone or an audio interface or a printer, whatever it is. Imagine having automations that do things in the background based on what you connect to your computer. There's a third-party app that does this, I think, John, right?
There is. The name of it is escaping me. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I'll drop it in the show notes because I've been playing around with it a little bit, and it's quite interesting.
It's called the
it starts
app.
with an S.
Let's see, what is it called?
You know what it is? It's Stecker.
Stecker.
S-T-E-
It's in beta. I think it's in beta.
Yeah, Stecker. It's coming.
Yeah, and this is a very nice idea made by an indie developer. I really feel like, and no offense to the developer of Stecker, but this should really be a native shortcuts for Mac feature.
Well, that's what Apple should do. They should look at a lot of these. There are a lot of these apps that are showing up in the Mac that fill gaps in shortcuts. There's a whole bunch of utilities that I've tried, whether it's HomeKit holes or things like Stecker or various other kinds of personal automation and things like that. That would be that's like a menu right there of things that the shortcuts team should take a look at and consider.
Performance and reliability for shortcuts on the Mac.
Oh yeah, big time.
We've seen so many bugs in shortcuts for Mac over the past year, and just a couple of weeks ago, John was fighting this problem with a hotkey that he assigned to a shortcut, and that keyboard shortcut wasn't actually working. It wasn't doing anything. And I've been in that situation myself, like where when you want to assign a shortcut, a system-wide keyboard shortcut, which is an excellent feature that is Mac only still, but those shortcuts better be working when you invoke them, right? And instead, so many times they don't. They just
or they literally disappear from the UI. Or they disappear
from the UI, or they don't work. And so many times I had to remake my own keyboard shortcut for a shortcut using Raycast or better Touch Tool. And for whatever reason, those keyboard shortcuts are more reliable and sticky, whereas the Apple ones are not. And just, I still feel like shortcuts for Mac as a Swift UI app, it still needs a ton of love in the polish department. Just, sometimes drag and drop is weird or buttons end up in the wrong place. So a lot of polish and refinement, I think, would be nice to have in shortcuts. And lastly, I would love to see more bridges to the old world of macOS automation. I think it's great that we have the run shell script and run Apple script actions, but there continues to be a whole other sort of aspect of macOS that has been untouched by Apple, and that is automating the UI of apps. Now, UI automation has notoriously been a very finicky thing to do, right? The UI can change based on how big you want to make text size in an app or what language you're using. But I still feel like Apple has maybe an opportunity to do things like more universal, I guess is what I'm saying, UI automation. Things like open this app, make it this big, and click this menu item in the menu bar. Like make it a little more standardized, I guess, in terms of I want to open this app and I want a bunch of steps to be automatically performed. Maybe the menu bar could become part of shortcuts. This is something that Better Touch Tool can do. Activate a menu item. Maybe that's something that shortcuts could do instead in a more native way with support for multiple languages, right? So I hope that Apple considers this aspect of controlling the UI without actually controlling it yourself, by using shortcuts instead.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, Apple is doing that sort of thing in the accessibility field to a degree. And it's the kind of thing that it'd be interesting to see how it could be applied into the Shortcuts app as well. And I think you're right, Federico, not just about reliability, but extending more system actions, because we really didn't see a lot change with Ventura with Shortcuts. There were some changes here and there, but it was a pretty quiet year. So I really would like to see a little something more in 2023. All right, Federico, that's it for today's episode. I want to thank our sponsor again. That's Factor. You can find the two of us over at macstories.net and at Club Mac Stories. And if you're interested in joining Club Mac Stories, learning what it's about and that sort of thing, just go to plus.club. We've got all the details there. And if you sign up for the Club Premier plan, you can even get App Stories Plus as part of that package. We're also on Mastodon. You can follow Federico by visiting fetici.macstories.net or me by going to johnvorhees.macstories.net, where you'll find a follow button to follow both of us there. And we're on Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.